We are on air. The news is breaking not only of Puzder withdrawing, but also this option being put forward. Senator Bob Menendez is at the U.S. Capitol building. Democrat senator for New Jersey, a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And Senator, we are very fortuitous to have you with us as this is coming out. So your initial reaction at even an option, I'm going no further than that, of ground troops for Syria would be what?
Would be a dramatic shift in our policy. The reality that we have had some special forces, particularly for targeting, for training and assisting purposes of those who are moderate vetted Syrian rebels. But the introduction of ground forces, it would have to have a clearly defined mission. And in my view, would clearly have to come to the Congress for support. Otherwise, the president would be risking enormously the goodwill, not to mention any type of support for the long-term commitments that he's thinking about. So this is the first I've heard of it, and of all the hearings I've ever sat in on Syria and all the briefings I've ever sat in on Syria, I've never heard the possibility of the introduction of ground forces. So we'd have to hear what the mission is and how it would be accomplished and what size of forces would be necessary. So
from your perspective, it would be unthinkable to prosecute such a development without going to Congress, whether for permission or just to inform?
I think it needs more than just information. It needs consultation, and possibly, depending upon what the nature of the mission is, it may very well need action by Congress. If you are committing troops abroad, then the president is going to have to define for what purpose that is. Is there an immediate threat to the United States? Are you committing to fight an enemy in a longer term? Are you declaring war in a context? In this context, even if it's against ISIS in Syria? I mean, for what purposes we're going to have clearly to know, as well as obviously the funding of those troops for any proposition would come to Congress.
Again, if the president says, well, you know, President Obama spent several years and a great deal of money and didn't make much inroads, in his view, on dealing with ISIS. And this president went to the country promising a decisive, groundbreaking measure against ISIS. Would you be minded to give him leeway, to give him benefit of doubt?
Well, Richard, I'd have to know what the mission is. You know, I have always been willing in my 25 years in Congress to support a president in an engagement abroad if it's in the national security interests of the United States. And my standard is I will send my son and daughter to fight for America if the cause is right. But if I don't believe the cause is right, not only will I not send my son and daughter, I won't vote to send anyone else's sons and daughters. So we have to know what the mission is here to understand whether or not we can be supportive of the president. I certainly want to do everything to defeat ISIS, but I have to understand that there is a mission that's coherent and has a possibility of success.
We need to skate to other ice. Mr. Puzder, who has withdrawn his nomination for Labour Secretary, how do you see this in the greater scheme of things? Was it just a bad nominee who's fallen as he should have done, or is this the Democrats managing to create a doubt and pick off enough Republicans?
Well, today his withdrawal is a victory for the American worker. He was a bad nominee to start off with. All of his record was being exposed, both as why he would not be a good labor secretary, what he has been as an anti-worker individual in this country and CEO, personal issues that were coming up. He would have had a very exhaustive hearing tomorrow, and I don't think he could have withstood the hearing, and he has lost support among Republicans as well.
So John King was just saying to me a moment ago, who obviously you know, that one of the interesting things is the way Democrats are sticking together at the moment. There's no fraying in Democratic opposition. What's holding the Democratic caucus together at the moment?
Well, look, I think we're not I've voted for some of the president's nominees, such as General Mattis and General Kelly in Defense and Homeland Security, Secretary Chow for Transportation. But the bottom line is you have a series of exceptionally bad nominees, some of them really unexperienced for the particular departments they've been nominated, some who have said they want to slay the very department they've been nominated to, and some who have very, ideological views like ending Medicare and Medicaid as we know it, that galvanizes the Democratic Party on behalf of American citizens in this country who don't share those views.
Now, I do need to, you've been very generous with your time, but I do need to talk about the very thing that we invited you to talk about originally, which was Venezuela. Now, when you heard yesterday, I believe it was yesterday, you heard the Treasury Secretary, Treasury Secretary Mnuchin, imposing the sanctions on individuals allegedly for drug dealing. Do you think this is the sort of measures that finally the administration is taking against Venezuela that needs to be extended further?
Absolutely. I applaud the Trump administration for acting decisively. I and my colleagues, both in the House and the Senate, sent a letter to President Trump calling for sanctions to be imposed, sanctions that I helped write into law. For him actually to pursue one of the individuals we mentioned, the vice president of Venezuela, Tariq el-Isami, is an enormous step forward. I had one of the wives of one of the imprisoned leaders, labor leaders, and political leaders in Venezuela, Leopoldo Lopez, who said it just reverberated across Venezuela and civil society, and I think it's exactly what needs to be done to a regime that is oppressing its people and causing enormous hardship.
Senator, may I thank you? You've been so generous with your time today, and we're glad that you joined us on Quest Means Business.
Good to be with you, Richard.
Thank you.